Okay, so I wanted to talk about the two types of files that I've seen that I have in my vault, because I think that that actually is important for the app itself. There's no agreed upon standard for semantic search. Like, there is no right or wrong way, especially given all of the flexibility in the sentence level embeddings versus document level embeddings, but also the way that different models are trained. Like, BERT is different than OpenAI embeddings, and they both function differently. So some of them prefer document level embeddings, some of them prefer sentence level embeddings. But broadly speaking, I think that the text that's stored has to be split by some categorization to be able to be useful. So let me talk about the two types of files that I have. So two types of files. So the two types of files are atomic files, atomic, and disambiguation files. Disambiguation. So a disambiguation, you can see both of these, for example, on like a Wikipedia, right? So like if I switch over to, I don't have Chrome open. Hold on, let me switch over to Chrome and open a new tab. Go to Wikipedia and then go to Chrome, window, properties. So like on Wikipedia, for example, if you just go to like a random article like Caroline Island, this would be kind of what would be considered an atomic note, right? Like this is all of these, actually all of these subsections would probably be more considered atomic, where it's like Caroline Island dot prehistory or Caroline Island dot early sightings and accounts, or the 1883 solar eclipse. But then if you want to jump into a disambiguation, that's where you get a collection of notes, and it's not really as clear as that, right? So like a disambiguation of just kind of like, oh, there could be a lot of different notes in this category, but largely speaking, the idea is how distilled can your idea get? And that's kind of when it's atomic. And a distilled idea in language generally is a sentence. A sentence is usually self-contained within the boundaries of the first word to the terminal character, which is like usually a period or a question mark or something like that. So for example, this sentence right here, the Carolines are scattered across a distance of 3,450 kilometers to the westernmost island Toby and Palau, to the easternmost island Corsair, the state of the FSM, which if you go to the next sentence is that the group consists of about 500 coral islands east of the Philippines in the Pacific Ocean. Both of those are related to the overall topic of the Caroline Islands, but neither of them is actually like linked, or it would have been in the same sentence. So the way that sentences are kind of formed structurally is that they're formed to be self-contained, which is why people get so mad at run-on sentences, because run-on sentences include way too much data for the single sentence to be atomic anymore. So what does that look like in Obsidian? So at least in my notes, I have a few disambiguation type notes where they're held by the category. So they're kind of like a menu at a restaurant. So, you know, let me look at exactly. So like, let me get like a menu for like Benihana's. So like if I took this menu here, scaled this up and zoomed in. So this menu has a lot of sections and subsections and items on the menu. And it's like literally the lowest res image I've ever seen in my life. But they're all under this express lunch, right? Like express lunch combo, entrees, rice bowl, lunch boat, all belong, quote unquote, to express lunch. And I think that that's an important point to make, right? Is that the disambiguation notes that I'm talking about work like that. So for example, I'll have my Readwise books. So I'll call it Readwise as r/books, not to be confused with Reddit. And then I have articles, and then I have daily notes. These are the main kind of disambiguations that exist within my system. The thing that they all share in common is that they all come from a certain source. So everything in a daily note comes from that day. Everything in it, what just happened? Okay, hold on. Hold the phone. That's weird. Oh, wow, that's even weirder. What is going on, my guy? You good? Okay, hold on. Let me put these back. Daily books. I'll just use daily and books. I don't need articles too. Okay. So the thing that daily and books, again, share in common is that daily notes are anything that happened during this day, and book notes are a lot of quotes from the same book, basically. Atomic notes are in and of themselves terminal, in the sense that atomic note will look something along the lines of like this, where I'll have like the title that is descriptive, and then like one paragraph of highly related info. So those two types of files call for different mechanisms of embedding, right? Like in Atomic one, you can do document level embedding pretty easily because the whole document is super short. And we wouldn't even need to really embed the document because all we would need to do is embed the heading or the file name, which would hold all the data for us. But for a disambiguation, like a menu, you might want to actually know what the rice bowls are, and you might not just want to search express lunch, right? So you might want to be like, oh, well, what's on the lunch boat, for example, like I want shrimp or something. And so for that, it makes more sense to do a sentence level embedding. The problem is I can't really do both without coming up with two data structures to store this information, right? Like over here, we talked about the embedding model and we talked about the index that we're storing it in, but I can't really do that with both of these things. I kind of have to make a choice, and that's not fully true. Like I can write the code in such a way that it automatically says if it's in this folder or has a certain format, do sentence level embeddings and store all those too. But then you bring up the thing of like, you have to now use a pointer structure, right? So like the initial kind of concept that I came up with was to embed the file name and then just query this directly. So the query over here would just automatically hit the embedded file name. And this works for Atomic Notes. But if I wanted to do the disambiguation too, I would need to embed the file name, but then I'd also need to embed the sentences within it. And that means that I'd have to have a data structure that can do both of these things. It would need to be able to embed a file name and then embed a sentence, but then also keep these sentences in like cold storage. And like I said, I'm not really excited about that prospect. If anything, I would like the ability to search just file names and have that be an app. But I do also want to be able to have access to like book quotes and stuff and things that I did on a day. So for example, this daily note, I'd only be able to search it by saying what happened on April 30th. And then it would pull up 2022-0430 because that's the closest note match. But I wouldn't be able to say like, what is this type of quote? It wouldn't be able to find that directly. So there's a few things that I was thinking of is that if I want to go this route about the disambiguation route, I think what I can do is do a 2-layer search. So I think that kind of similar to this embed file name, embed sentences thing up here, I can do my query can just be for a file name that I think is in here. So like, let's say for example, that I want to query this embedded file name over here, and then in real time, so let me call this like a square, real time ask user to search the file. So this real-time ask user to search the file functionality is the kind of like, okay, hey, I found April 30th. Would you like me to search for barbecue sauce or something to see if there's barbecue sauce in this thing? So you would actually need another query from the user. This has to be a double query. So this is deleted actually. So the way that this looks is that you embed the file name, then you ask the user to query again for the thing that they're looking for, which of course isn't ideal, right? Like you would want a single query step, but then you wouldn't have to store anything. So like the way it would work is that you would say what's happened on April 30th and then be like, I found April 30th. What do you want to ask April 30th? It's like, do I have barbecue sauce? And it'll be like, I didn't find this in the file, or I did find this in the file. So you can't just ask, do I have barbecue sauce? It couldn't skip to this step without having these sentences embedded beforehand, which is unfortunate and makes me think like, oh, well, then I can just do the other extreme. So the other extreme is to have the query and then have all of the sentences embedded. So you'll have like jillion sentences embedded. But in addition to that, you need to have a link to the file that they belong to. So you have to have a link to the parent file, and you have to have the regular kind of query workflow that I was just describing. And that's not ideal either, because then all of a sudden you have to store this, right? So you have to go to your database structure, and then you got to copy this guy. You paste him right here, and you scroll him down because he's way too big. big. So you have to store the link to the parent file and the billion embedded sentences in here. And that's just not great. That's really not like a good mechanism either, because it's very brittle, funnily enough, because when you search for barbecue sauce, it's going to be comparing against millions of things. And the differences between these things, at least in my experience, can be minimal. So it'll be like a 63% match to Baby Ray's, but then a 62% match to Baby. And that is just not valuable in a lot of ways. So, and then the third thing is that I just want to have this done by like Friday so I can move on to the next project too. Or not Friday, maybe like early next week. So with all those things considered, it makes me just want to just skip the disambiguation problem, which isn't ideal because it kills off a lot of potential searches that could happen. And it kind of puts a lot more pressure on the end user to remember the file that they're looking at or they're looking for. And that's not something that you can really rely on consistently, right? Like the whole point of search is to just find the thing and not get in your way. So I don't know. It's complicated. It's really not straightforward. My gut tells me that the strategy is to do a live updating index of the daily folder and the Readwise folder like every day or something like that, or like update it once a month and then just store that in its own database table, and then in like their own database tables, excuse me, and then just do the file names that updates every day for everything else. And then when you search against all three indexes. So it'll be like, oh, in index 2, I found this in the daily notes section. In index 1, I found these 3 files that fit this criteria. And in index 3, I found 2 quotes from this book that might be helpful. That's probably the most straightforward way of doing it. But let's say that vector database options, Pinecone, which I already discovered or just talked about. Not all vector databases are equal by Dimitri Kahn. Collection level similarity. On an object level, you can find neighbors to your query using a similarity function instead of a sparse keyword lookup. Oh no, this is just describing. Pays attention to scalability, fully managed vector database to support your unstructured search engine journey, single stage filtering capability, search for your objects, sweaters, and filter by metadata, color, price, availability in one single query. FIASS, Qdrant. What is this? Vector search engine. Production ready service with a convenient API to store, search, and manage points without an additional payload. Qdrant is tailored to extended filtering support. It makes useful all sorts of neural networks or semantic-based matching, faceted search, and other applications. Written in Rust, but how does it... Okay, so you build it, and then you curl your test collection. Does that mean that the test collection already has to be embedded? Is a question. Expected response. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. It also... I wonder if you can just put stuff in there, though. Like if you make your vectors with another service, storing data is actually like really annoying because you have to decide where to put all this stuff, and it's like just not at all convenient as like hosting a web server. Okay, so it has this like payload object, which I think is like the closest to thing to the like link back to the file name or whatever. A collection is a set of points which you can search. Yeah, cosine similarity, we talked about this last stream. In addition to metrics and vector size, each uses its own set of parameters that control collection optimization, index construction, and vacuuming. Post aliases, upgrading your neural network. But how do you put what? You create a collection, aliases. Okay, so points are part of a collection then. A point is a record consisting of a vector and an optional payload. Yeah, I want to learn more about this payload. One of the significant features is the ability to store additional information along with vectors. That's pretty nice. This information is called a payload in Qdrant terminology. So that's kind of nice because then I can just use file names and stuff. And I already can do the vectors. Like that's not the problem either. So do I make the vector or do they make the vector for me? It looks like I make the vector. So I put points in here and I can just use like a UUID, I guess, to optimize performance, batch loading of points in one API call. Okay, so how do I, if I wanted to modify and delete points, re-upload the point to modify the vector, modify the payload, for which there are several methods. Okay, searching dot product. Yeah. yeah, got it. Must. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. We pass in our vector, which is what I want because I'm doing my own vector stuff with OpenAI, creating the vectors for me. We pass in the filter that does the payload filtering, and then it gives us back our IDs. And then I wonder if I can just store the text. I wonder if I can basically have both. Like, I don't know if there's like a schema validation or something that I need to do. Maybe I'll search for that. Yo, it'd be so ironic if you couldn't search this website that's building a search documentation for semantic search. Can you not? That's crazy. Oh, dude, no shot. You can't search on the GitHub package that is made for semantic search. That's actually nuts. That's pretty hilarious. A billion search engine backend with Elasticsearch. You can implement an energy, time, and efficient multimodal search. Right now, I'm just kind of comparing options. I think I'm in the, given the information just delivered, right? So like we know that like our main enemy right now is this atomic and disambiguation thing, where we have atomic files, which will be really easy, and I didn't even need storage for that. Honestly, I could just call this project a wrap if I just wanted to search just the file names and then just kind of like embed them in real time, like once every 24 hours, store them in just a regular database because there's not enough of them to matter, and then just search that file name. But then there's these two notes that actually hold a lot of data, right? Like most of my... All right, well, hold on now. There's another thing that I should discuss. So one of the best ways to use Obsidian is to go into your daily note and turn these into atomic things. The problem is, or atomic notes that sit at the root directory and use tagging and stuff like that. So you can really take advantage of connections like this built on stream, for example, or, here's Leibniz up here. Here's start here in fleeting notes. Some things to me feel like they don't have titles, if that makes sense. Like, okay, so like if I kind of look at this, like the goals for the stream, for example, I could extract this and say that this is its own file for goals for the stream for September 1st, 2022. That could be its own file. But then the question is, do I have to turn this into a file? Talking about the two types of atomic and disambiguation and that there's no agreed upon standard. And then do I have to make this into a file where it because code for both and try on a small set of examples, give Obsidian a hot new look? If I, for example, wanted to search Obsidian appearance, it still wouldn't show up with goals for the stream 9/12 or 9/01/2022. Like that wouldn't show up. I would need to manually like do that, which isn't great. Wait, can you make your video screen a bit smaller so I can see the full notes? Yeah, I'm vain like that. I like to have my huge camera in the way. Is that better? Yeah, smiley. Yeah, thank you, dude. I appreciate that. Thank you for the note. So that kind of again leads me into the same kind of catch-22 here, where it's like then the idea would just be to use sentence embeddings, because sentence level embeddings would just function better, right? But the problem with sentence level embeddings is that I'd have ton in this billion embedded sentences, and that's just not great either. And I'd have to like manage all this storage, which is why this problem is so difficult and why it's only solved by mega companies that have a lot of money. And I'm but one boy.